Hi folks, Matt McSpirit here, engineering technologist here at Dell Technologies, and we are at Microsoft Ignite in person.
In person, how cool is that?
Isn't it crazy?
Yes.
First conference for me since 2019, so that's over 3 years. What about you?
Well, we had a couple. We had Dell Tech World earlier this year. That was fun. You know, the coolest thing being here is you're talking with people and they really want to be here.
Yes.
They want to talk. They're thirsty for knowledge, and it's so much fun just to interact with our customers right now.
Yeah, and I wanted to pull Rob aside and digest some of the news that we've heard since Ignite started just a few hours ago. So a lot of hybrid goodness has come out of it. So we're going to take you through our perspective on some of these announcements. There's stuff around Azure Stack Hci, AKS, there's Azure Arc announcements, all sorts of cool stuff. But I wanted to start by focusing in on one of the announcements that's actually not a technical feature, not a new capability, not something that's going to enable you to do things totally differently with the keyboard. It's more around a licensing change, and that's around the Azure Hybrid Benefits. Now, if you're not familiar with the Azure Hybrid Benefits, these have been around for a little while, and they enable you, should you have invested in, for example, Windows Server Data Center with software assurance, it grants you additional benefits when it comes to moving those technologies and embracing cloud technologies like Windows Server and Azure. There's been some new announcements at Ignite around utilizing your existing Windows Server software assurance or cloud solution provider subscription and benefiting from being able to run Azure Stack Hci at no additional cost. So picture the scenario. You've got your physical infrastructure, you've got your Dell integrated system for Microsoft Azure Stack Hci, and on there you want to run Azure Stack Hci. So there's a subscription cost associated with that. It's a per physical core license, $10 a month, depending on how many cores you've got. Now from there, if you want to run Windows Server guests, you can either essentially perpetually license Windows Server Data Center and cover all of your virtual machines, or alternatively, you could subscribe to covering all the physical cores in those boxes and benefit from running Windows Server there. But those are both additional costs on top of Azure Stack Hci. So this big licensing change now for the Windows Server plus HCI combination in hybrid benefits means that if I'm a Windows Server with software assurance customer, I cover all of the physical cores in my systems, and I can use Azure Stack Hci at no additional cost. That's a huge saving, potentially, depending on the size of your infrastructure, especially if you've already got that existing investment.
And it allows for a jump-off point for clients really to start getting into this hybrid world, because we're lighting up so many more features, or Microsoft, and Dell combined are lighting up more and more features with this type of functionality.
Exactly.
So it only behooves clients to do this.
Yeah, but it doesn't just stop there. So having the Azure Stack layer covered as part of your Windows Server software assurance and hybrid benefit is great. But then what if you want to start modernizing your applications with something like Kubernetes? So the AKS on Azure Stack Hci service or solution has been around for a while and gives organizations an easy on-ramp to bringing Kubernetes on premises, taking all of that AKS goodness in the cloud and running it on top of HCI. But it came at an additional cost, a per vCPU core cost or per vCPU cost for the worker nodes of that AKS environment running on HCI. Well, another one of these hybrid benefits is now that that's included as well. So you have not only Azure Stack Hci included, so you don't pay that subscription cost if you've got Windows Server software assurance, but you also get the benefit of AKS on Azure Stack Hci at no additional cost. So that combined gives you a solution at much lower cost for traditional applications and more modernized Kubernetes-based applications.
And when I'm talking with clients, especially, then I'll take this conversation quick to maybe Arc Data Services, which requires what? You just mentioned, AKS. Okay,
or any CNCF certified.
NEC, exactly right. However, AKS on HCI is a very easy way to get started with Kubernetes. Not to mention then you're hooking up to Arc and you have all the insights and monitoring available there, so you're not flying blind. And now you're getting it basically at no cost. So you have the foundation laid now for DB as a service, Arc-enabled data service over the top. That's pretty awesome. And not to mention now we also have, hopefully coming up very soon, we have an announcement for SQL 2022, Arc-enabled also. That's coming. We'll be out probably here again at this venue here in another month doing the same thing, talking about this. And I'm sure there's going to be some more announcements. So that's starting with HCI and putting AKS over the top really allows these features and really hybrid functionality to become a reality inside our client's
It just removes one of those kind of on-ramps and trade-offs, like I've already paid for Windows Server, I've got Hyper-V, should I move to Azure Stack Hci and pay on top of that? Well, now you don't have to think about that, even though there is a ton of value in Azure Stack Hci to justify paying for both, so HCI at the infrastructure layer and the Windows servers to cover your guests. It just streamlines that conversation so much more as well.
And ease of use, right, with AKS. I can't say this enough. We've done a lot of work inside of Dell, as you know, using AKS and writing papers and blogs and demos and videos. And this is what we do all day, every day. We love it. It gives our clients the comfort of moving forward with this new type of architecture.
Yeah. And that's a big licensing change for that's announced at Ignite. But in addition, from a more technical and functional perspective, those of you may be familiar with the self-service VM provisioning from Azure onto Azure Stack Hci Clusters. So this idea of being able to use Azure as this central place to not only deploy VMs into Azure, but now deploy them outside of Azure on top of Azure Stack Hci. Well, that's getting public preview too, so that brings some additional functionality around curated marketplace images that you can provision down to your Azure Stack Hci clusters. So the Windows Server Azure Edition, awesome operating system to run on-prem, and Windows 11 Enterprise Multi-Session if you're thinking about running Azure Virtual Desktop on Azure Stack Hci, so two big benefits there. And little things like when you deploy one of these VMs through this self-service mechanism onto your Azure Stack Hci cluster, your guest OS is automatically Arc-enabled with Arc-enabled servers. So you get that added insight and benefit. You can enable things like VM extensions to join that VM to the domain or run a custom script. So little quality of life improvements that just make that whole experience that little bit better. But then for the Azure Stack Hci OS itself, 22H2 is imminent, so you should be able to download that. It's available very, very soon. And that brings things like improvements in network ATC for automating and streamlining the way you configure the network infrastructure for an Azure Stack Hci cluster, taking into account all the different networks you need, storage, live migration, management, and really optimizing those based on the intent of what you're trying to achieve. So really streamlining and solving some of the complexity. There's more enhancements around flexible storage management, being able to go from a fixed to a thin provision disk if you want, or volume, changing the level of volume resiliency from two-way to three-way mirror, for example, improvements in storage replication. There's enhancements to GPUs. More and more organizations looking at using GPUs for specific workloads. So GPU partitioning, or GPU-P, as it's sometimes known, is a way of slicing a GPU and allocating those slices to different virtual machines rather than a whole big GPU to a single VM, which doesn't scale as well. So that GPU functionality, GPU-P functionality, will be available after, so not immediately at Ignite, so that's going to take a little bit longer to come in preview, but that won't be too far away. And that'll support things like live migration as well. So having that slice of that GPU attached to a particular VM, but that VM not being landlocked to a specific physical node is very, very important for an agile and flexible infrastructure. And then when you think about support, things do go wrong with software, and if you're in need of some help from Microsoft support, you can obviously go through the Azure portal. You can contact Dell, obviously, and we'll help you as well, should it be a Dell integrated system for Azure Stack Hci. But Microsoft has also enhanced the remote support such that you'll be able to allow Microsoft support engineers remote access to your system to get logs, run commands, and assist with the support process, which is a big enhancement, I think. And then finally on Azure Stack Hci, even though we're just talking about 22H2, the latest build being made available for production use, 23H2 is going to be available as a preview build very soon. So if you're wanting to stay at the cutting edge and you want to, not for production workloads, but you want to stay at the cutting edge and see what's coming next, not too many new features in there just yet, but that build you'll be able to download very soon. And obviously, when you're running one of these preview builds, there's no charges associated with those. So that's a good way to keep your Azure costs down, but don't run production workloads on the 23H2 dev build. That's a no-no, no support for that one. So that's a little bit about HCI. What about AKS? You've touched on it already.
I did touch on it already, and that consistent deployment experience wherever you're at. Now we're going from Windows to all the way out to the edge with AKS. So again, it's that consistent Kubernetes experience. You mentioned NEC NCF can be, yes, with Arc enabled. However, AKS is now a consistent experience, being able to move workloads around landing on various AKS deployments and clusters, wherever they may be, from the edge to the core, even to the cloud, and anywhere within. So that's a consistent experience. We've been playing around with this and actually doing this and have clients that love to see this now because it actually does enable multi-location, multi-cloud.
Yeah.
The cloud can be anywhere. It could be someone's edge. It could be in their data center, of course, in Azure or any cloud. But this is really where they're going. And even with enhancements to the CLI, and of course, then plugging everything into GitOps and just checking in your code and getting back to that desired state config, wherever that is, always keeping that steady state. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's something that people have longed to get to. Now we're actually getting there with containers, smaller units,
making it easier. And that's one of the big benefits of AKS on HCI in general, is just how streamlined it makes embracing a Kubernetes infrastructure, abstracting so much of the complexity, streamlining the deployment such that it's easy to just start working on the applications. And there's been a number of enhancements in AKS on HCI specifically that just make things better, quality of life improvements, I'll call them. So firstly, if you're deploying Linux-based workloads, you'll be using the Mariner OS. Mariner 2.0 is a new build. It's essentially half the size, 50% of the size of Mariner 1, so less to download, streamlined patching, enhanced security, better support. There's SDN support integrated now with AKS on Azure Stack HCI, so you can take advantage of Azure Stack HCI's SDN layer AKS on top of that, and you can benefit from combining those technologies even when SDN is enabled. Enhancements for GPU support. So I mentioned GPU-P, that's not there yet, but if you're using regular GPUs today with Azure Stack HCI and you want to use them with AKS on top, with containers, with worker nodes, then you've got the benefit of integrating more streamlined with those GPUs. And then finally, one of the things I'm most excited about, up until now, if you wanted to provision a new AKS workload cluster to run, let's say, Arc data services or a line of business Kubernetes-based application, you had to provision that Kubernetes cluster using either PowerShell or Windows Admin Center, using bespoke commands that are unique to the AKS HCI experience. When if you're in Azure and you're deploying AKS clusters in Azure natively, you're using either the portal, AZ CLI, you're using that Azure experience, and the two are very different. Mm-hmm. Well, we just announced in preview that you can now provision hybrid AKS worker nodes, clusters, to your on-prem AKS HCI infrastructure. So I can use the Azure experience through Arc to deploy clusters, which opens up the door to self-service developer experiences to deploy those clusters, not just in public Azure, but now also on AKS and HCI. So you get a unification of the deployment experience based on who you are, your user permissions, and then what you're allowed to do against both environments. So really cutting edge stuff, really awesome. It just makes sense, and it's just really streamlining the way people manage Kubernetes. And then from there, as you said, deploy applications and so on. The final bit around AKS was a bit of a left field, kind of didn't expect that type announcement, and that's if you want to deploy AKS clusters, but your device isn't quite beefy enough, it's not quite powerful enough, AKS HCI needs a decent amount of memory, CPU, storage. Yeah. It's not designed to be run on a small scale system like a laptop, for example. Whereas AKS Lite, which is going to be in preview in November, brings a lightweight Kubernetes distribution, only requires 2 virtual processors, 4 gig of RAM. So we're talking on IoT level devices here. So if you need to be deploying a managed Kubernetes experience, managed through Arc, integrated with Arc, but run it on a device that's going to be sat in a small scale, low powered device that's going to be sat in a manufacturing location or a retail store or some other remote location, then you can do that. And that's where AKS Lite comes in.
This is so awesome just from a quick, even a dev test perspective. Again, starting to get people to start using it, right? It's so easy to deploy this, because I've been doing it with various flavors of Kubernetes for a long time, but having now the same AKS that I'm using in bigger environments, small, just for dev test, spin it up, I love this. This is an awesome announcement.
Awesome. Now, lots of announcements there across Azure Stack HCI, AKS HCI. What's the best way to test it? Well, you can obviously roll it out on physical hardware, which the Dell integrated system for Azure Stack HCI is a great way to experience all of that. But if you don't have any gear and you want to test something quickly, Microsoft have announced a new initiative following in the footsteps of the Azure Arc Jumpstart, or a part of the Azure Arc Jumpstart. There was the Arc Box, which was a standalone sandbox environment that was automated in terms of its deployment and enabled you to experience a load of the Arc-based technologies in a sandbox. Well, HCI Box has just been announced as a means to deploy in a sandbox VM in Azure all of those things that we just talked about. So Azure Stack Hci, the new versions nested inside that big Azure VM. And on top of that Azure Stack Hci cluster, you've got an AKS HCI cluster that's integrated with Azure, Arc enabled, the resource bridge, the VM self-service, all of the stuff that we talked about and more, all configured in about 3 or 4 hours. So you just deploy it with a bicep template, and within a couple of hours, you've then got a HCI sandboxed environment. Great for kind of day 2 experiences, deploying test VMs, functional testing, and so on and so forth. So
it's quite the levels of inception there, right?
Multiple, yeah. You could lose yourself in multiple levels inside that sandbox. But the beauty of it is it's just running in a single VM. Once you're done with it, once you want to start again, delete that one, redeploy, and you've got a nice, fresh environment that's pretty customizable as well. So that's in preview. The team are working hard on that. So make sure you check out the HCI box. All the links to all the things we've covered today will be in the show notes and the resources below. So check those out. And with that, we hope to give you more content coming live from Ignite. Thanks, Rob, for your time. Any final words?
No, I mean, hey, thanks for watching. A lot of exciting things coming down here, especially in the next few months and in the beginning of next year. We couldn't be more excited, Dell and Microsoft together. A lot of good partnership going on here. It's a lot of fun.
Cool. See you next time, folks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.